It's 1973. The first big climate protest is taking place because people are seeing that without immediate concrete action, there will be no credible future. But now in 2023, when 1973 is exactly 19,404 days ago, still no credible action has been taken to mitigate the effects of climate change. 50 years ago, people said we needed to change. 50 years ago, people said we can't continue on like this. But still, we are fighting the same fight. 4 years ago, the IPBES released a report about climate change, a shocking report. In this report, they stated that since 1900, the sea has risen by at least 16 to 25 centimeters. And that since 1900, 219 million hectares of native forests have been cut down. And maybe the most shocking of all, that the extinction rate is between 1,000 and 10,000 times higher than normal. But still, no action. And those were just 3 of the shocking facts presented in this report. And I, Jonathan Hiep, 17 years old, cannot ignore those facts. I can't stand by while big corporations destroy my and my children, their children's future. That is why I am a climate activist. 4 years ago, I went to my first climate protest, organized by the environmental group Fridays for the Future in The Hague. We marched through the streets chanting. It was amazing. I was immediately grasped by the power and energy of the movement. So logically, many other protests followed. But then in the March of 2020, the COVID lockdown hit the Netherlands. I couldn't go to school anymore. So also no climate protests. So now in January of 2023, I went to my first Extinction Rebellion action. This action was to protest the 30 billion euros in subsidies the Dutch government gives to fossil fuels companies and the industry. We were going to block the A12, a highway in The Hague, exactly between 2 ministries. But before I went and did this action, I took an action training. A training to learn about the risks, the tactics, signals, those come with an action. I also learned how to talk to the police, speak to the press, and how to react to angry bystanders. In this action training, I was welcomed with open and warm arms. And it really felt like coming home after a long time gone. It was so amazing, just like the action. Every part was even more amazing than the previous. Firstly, we walked from the station to a field next to the A12. On the way to the station, we walked in pairs of 2, as though to not be spotted by police. But to be honest, pairs of thickly clothed people with huge backpacks on and those mountain climbing shoes were not really that inconspicuous. So we stood there on the field next to the highway, waiting for the signal. And then in the distance you could hear drums. And in what felt like a second, the whole highway was flooded with thousands of people. And I just stood there in awe, being surrounded by people. We marched into the tunnel of the A12, chanting, the drums echoing loudly throughout the tunnel, And then it was like the sky broke open. We walked into the open, and people from the streets above us were cheering us on. The colors, the flags, it was amazing. I will never forget that moment. After this beautiful action, I went to many more, small and big. Last month, I went to an action with 7,500 people, but also to an action with 15, just to show the diversity in numbers. When I went to this, I also started the process of organizing my own climate action. This process, I learned a lot of things from. I learned how to speak to the press, even better than I could ever learn at the action training, talk to the police, decide on what place you should choose for an action, and how to deal with backlash from the community. But next, I was also invited to speak to the head of climate of North Holland. He wanted to talk to me about my concerns about my future and the problem that I pointed out with my action. I also was invited to come and speak here, which I'm extremely thankful for. But next to these amazing experiences, you also come to realize what a world we live in. A world where we see police violence, learn about the horrors of climate change. But I truly believe that if you have to face these absolutely horrific facts, XR, Extinction Rebellion, is the best community to have behind you. For example, I went to London with a train, not a plane, to go to one of the biggest climate protests in history, the big one in London. I went alone, without a parent or an adult, and I'm still alive. I was provided with food. I was invited into people's home for breakfast. I was invited into churches to sleep, and all just because I was part of Extinction Rebellion, and just because we are all fighting the same fight. So believe me when I say, XR is the best community to have behind you if you're fighting the climate crisis. But still, after years of action, decades of action, peaceful protests, still no concrete action has been taken. There is still no future. And still, climate activists are being arrested, abused, prosecuted, but not convicted. Because the higher courts almost always decide that no crime has been committed. But still, the normal result of an action is that you get arrested and prosecuted. And I find that absolutely just unimaginable. If I talk about the action and I think about what my state of mind is like when I go into the action, it's like I want to make a point, but I can't make that point because police will drag me from the street, silence me. As the president of the United Nations once said, climate activists are sometimes depicted as dangerous radicals, but the truly dangerous radicals are the governments that are increasing the production of fossil fuels. This was said by the president of the United Nations, as I said before. So we need to make a change, and it needs to happen fast. But what do we need to change? Well, firstly, we should stop consuming and producing fossil fuels. We should stop cutting down forests and killing entire ecosystems. We should stop the killing of species. But wouldn't that cause chaos, I hear you ask? No more fossil fuels? That would be a disaster for the population, right? But do you know what would really cause chaos in this population? billions of climate immigrants because their cities are flooded, burned down into ashes because of extreme weather, houses being ripped apart by tornadoes, or the entire collapse of an ecosystem, that the air would become so unbreathable because toxic emissions are not properly regulated, penalized, and stopped. That would cause chaos. We need to make changes that seem scary, are scary, but are also needed. So if we ever make the change to a truly sustainable form of food and energy production, this world would become a better place. Maybe a great place even. Well, I mean, except for problems like racism, sexism, capitalism, discrimination on minorities, and all the other terrible things on this earth. But we'll discuss those issues another time. Thank you.